afternoon and welcome all. My name is Maponga J, broadcasting live from Ghana, the Gold Coast. I am sitting here with illustrious, our very old, I call him an ancestor, Rabbi Cohen. Many of you young people, you may not know him. He sits with a wealth of history. And I will take you through. You see how far we can go in our conversation for today. But tighten up your seatbelt. There will be lots to learn, experiences, giggles here and there, tears here and there. But I'm very, very excited to bring this live broadcast to all of you with our Rabbi Cohen. And we'll start off with an introduction. Who is Rabbi Cohen? Born where, to who, and we'll move slowly.
All right.
Until
Excellent.
we get to the end.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, my brother.
Yeah.
And once again, I want to give thanks and praise to the Almighty, the one by whom we live, move, and have our being, to the spirit of our ancestors, upon whose shoulders we stand, and especially to you, my brother. It's a blessing and a pleasure to be with you today and to share the same space and time. I'm Rabbi Kohen Netanya Halevi. Originally, I am from Mount Vernon, New York, born in New York. To my father, Amram Clarence Boykin Sr., and my mother, Helen Lee Swain. Both of them originally from North Carolina, that migrated during the great southern migration to the north in the United States because of the Jim Crow laws of the South at that time, and I won't go far into that, I just mentioned that. But I pride myself in being born in Mount Vernon, New York, because it's only 20 minutes away from the famous Harlem, New York,
All right.
where I got a lot of my exposure and consciousness as a young man, and introduced to the black nationalist movement, and eventually led me into who I am and reclaiming my heritage as an African Hebrew Israelite.
Wow.
And
if we look behind Rabbi Cohen here, it's an illustrious history that we can learn from. I hear you mentioned the black movement, black consciousness movement,
Yes.
and Black Panther movement, the Marcus Garvey era, Malcolm X's.
Yes.
Can you maybe, for the sake of the younger, my audience are quite young, and so what might be general knowledge to you is actually
I understand.
very, very specific news
Yes.
in your growth to moving into the Pan-African black consciousness space. Who are some of the characters you could have been meeting there in that particular era?
Well, as I alluded to for our younger audience, when I say that I was only 20 minutes away from Harlem, the place where I was born, Harlem actually represented the black capital of the world before we had the blessing and the pleasure of the independent movements here in Africa. And before Accra became the capital of Ghana in terms of under African control, and our Nairobis and our, Abuja and Lagos, Harlem was a grounds for the Pan-African movement. And so those are the grounds that the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey walked on, talked on, had his organization there. Those are the grounds that Malcolm X had his street corner sermons on. Those are the grounds that Herbert Harrison walked on. Those are the grounds that my elders, Rabbi Wentworth Matthew and Rabbi Ford, also walked on. I mention Rabbi Ford because I come also directly out of that line of African Hebraic rabbis and ministers. Rabbi Ford was one of the major supporters of the UNIA under Marcus Mosiah Garvey. He was the one that wrote all the martial songs for the UNIA when they had their parades.
He was a musician.
He was a musician and a great thinker. He spoke 7 different languages. And when Marcus Garvey was illegally jailed and framed in the U.S. and eventually deported, it was only Rabbi Ford that carried out the dream by moving his whole African Hebrew congregation from Harlem, New York to Ethiopia during the time of His Majesty's coronation. And he wrote the anthem for Ethiopia.
Wow.
And
he wrote the national anthem.
He wrote that. People don't make that diaspora connection.
Okay.
But Rabbi Josiah Ford wrote the anthem for Ethiopia, was accepted and adopted, by Haile Selassie, and more than anything else, he made the bridge and the connection between the Beta Yisrael, the Ethiopian Hebrews in Ethiopia, with the African Hebrew community in the United States, so that they didn't have to go through the European Jewish credentialing to say that they were connected to the Jewish community. They were already authentic.
Yeah.
And that has been a fight that has been happening throughout the years, that there was no need to have to acquiesce to anybody else's version of being Hebrew. There's no desire to be Jewish, but to be Hebrew when we are the original people. So
many of our young people today, they hear this cliche of Jim Crow, but in context, is there a character called Jim Crow? Is it a system called Jim Crow? Is it a nickname to mischief? Who, in your own words, who could this? What is it? What is this monster? Because we have lots of Jim Crows also around, and you just hear people that have traveled around passing on that comment.
Yeah.
The Jim Crow laws, Jim Crow. What is this Jim Crow?
Well, it was a system, and it took on the name of a very, very derogatory term that was labeled on blacks in America. And because we all know the crow traditionally is a black bird, and they use it as derogatory labeling. And so when they came out with what we call the Black Code laws, which was the arresting of the Reconstruction era after slavery ended in America, they came out with these Black Code laws in the South that so-called put the black man back in his place so he would not have access to his own emancipation. So that was a re-enslavement under another name. And they called it the Jim Crow laws. And so whenever you saw a black man, he was like, he was called a crow, as if to say you're a black bird, but in a negative connotation. Although we know the crow has some very positive connotation in terms of, his cleverness, that was not meant to cover that ground.
It was meant derogatory.
So when we say Jim Crow laws, they made it like Jim Crow sound like a person. And I'm glad you asked me that, because I've had young people in Ghana ask me, was that a person? I said, no, it's not a person.
There's a name and a synonym. It's a Jim and a Crow.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Jim Crow was a way of just, also saying, they had names like Sambo, Jim Crow, Watermelon, all kind of names they would call black people to try to bring down, who it is that we are by these so-called derogatory terms. And we would in turn turn them into something else when we refer to it and try to make a positive out of it, but that was never meant to be a positive.
In your generation, you have had to experience the transformation and the renaming of the black people. I mean, without being derogative, how old are you now?
I'm 72 years old.
You're 72 years old.
Yes.
So for the past 72 years that you have walked the face of this earth, maybe start with me when you became of age, to understand who you were. What did they call you? When you went to high school, primary school, whatever, what did they call you? By the time you go to college, what did you become? When you became a man, what are they calling you? And now that you are here in your silver years, when they refer to people of your color and my color, what are they calling? Maybe just take us through in your senior years, and take us from the time you remember 72 years, which is a full life. Some says you shall live three score and 10. You have reached anything after that is a bonus. So maybe give us a full overview of how you have come to experience the naming of the African people in whatever form they have been referred to across the oceans.
Well, of course, in the early years, I didn't come to meet this. You asked me to start with my 72 years, but I have to add this to it. People need to know that when we came to the Americas and were enslaved there, we came there and understood ourselves as African people. That's how we understood our institutions.
We started as Africans.
Absolutely. You had the African Methodist Church, you had the African Free Society. This is how we named our organizations. African Methodist Episcopal Zion, but African was in there. When you had your Masonic Lodge, the first lodge there was the African Lodge before they changed it to the Prince Hall Lodge. But somehow in there, that metamorphosized into Negro and colored. And the Negro and colored is what I came to meet.
By the time you're born,
by the time I was
you were born as a Negro.
As a Negro. And then
and
colored. And you'll see that, and again, the organizational structure. At the time,
we will continue the fight until the entire Sahel region is recovered.
Across the Sahel, N was for Negro. And when you see with the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the UNIA, it was
and there was the Negro.
There was Improvement Association. So in that respect, Negro and colored. Those who felt Negro was too stereotypical, they would say, I'm colored. But that also made, a reference to the mixture that we came in terms of we had those of various, mixtures, and someone didn't want to be known as actual Negro, and they would say colored. We came out of that situation, and I know during the advent of Malcolm X, Malcolm introduced another term called Afro-American. And that,
so it's Malcolm X who introduced that term.
Yes, he made it popular.
Afro-American.
Yeah, he made it popular. Yeah. And, I remember Ossie Davis, the famous
actor. You've met Malcolm X?
Yes, I've seen him when I was young at a speech. One of his speeches came to our hometown, seen this very tall, charismatic person, same thing, and I was fortunate enough because, again, Harlem being that kind of mecca of black consciousness, everybody had to come to Harlem. And we had an opportunity, whether you were young or older, to be there and all those street corner gatherings and see these great men.
But the fashion those days was hot. The only thing I know about Harlem is a small little movie I watched called Harlem Night. That's the close apartment. The suits, the hats, the polished shoes.
Well, to put that in perspective, because we were so denigrated, we were so downtrodden, as we would say, in other areas of America and the world, that people came to Harlem, black people came to Harlem to see how a proud black man or woman walked, see how they talked, see how they dressed, see just to mingle with how they thought, because you're going to see that, because we were told not to even look a white man in the eyes. Don't even walk upright. You're hunched over, scratch your head, shuffle your feet. And in Harlem, you saw a different breed of black man and black woman.
And in my formative years, I tried to do a bit of jazz, and then that's when I begin to hear this concept of the white concert halls are over there, and then the Wes Montgomerys, the Dizzy Gillespie's, the Miles Davises, the
John Coltrane's.
Yes. They started creating their own form of music, which was equally. And the amazing things is to see actually how that music, which was deemed to be for the Negroes, actually overtook
everything. Because what you find is that there is no authentic American culture in the USA outside of the African experience. Whether it's music, whether it's dance, whether it's cuisine, whether it's sports, whether it's fashion, swagger is spelled by the African.
I mean, amazing when you get to Britain and you find them saying the black women are voluptuous and etc. But the Victorian era actually specializes in making these metal dresses that pinch the stomach in, and then you put wires, like plenty wires, and then you hang all these garments, which actually exaggerate the female feature. And say, but if you say the female feature, African female feature is derogatory, then why have you turned into fashion?
Why are you trying to mimic it?
Yeah.
And so we see the contradiction there. Something that you castigate and that you label as negative, at the same time you wish you were that, and you try to copy that. So you see, I went that whole spectrum and that whole journey. These labels that we started with, as I mentioned, Afro-American, and then finally,
Negro and colored.
Yes.
Where are we now?
Now we are back to African-American. Right back full cycle.
The more we run away from something, we come back.
Truth crushed to the earth shall rise again.
There you go.
And so
now you're African.
Yes.
You're not Negro, you're not colored, you're not Afro-American.
See, when they began to come into Africa and to exploit Africa, and especially through exploiting Africans, they had to erase our history. And it started with erasing our knowledge of self. So when the Spanish and the Portuguese come in here in the beginning, they just simply say Negro, meaning black. And then they took the power of definition and began to define everything black as negative. And in that process, they actually removed our real identities, even to this day. If you say any of the high schools, even the universities, when they study the continent of Africa, they remove the identity of the African. So people can study Ghana, and they'll study Ghana coming out of the Gold Coast, but they don't know who are the people that live in Ghana. What are the people? What is the culture? What is the language that makes up Ghana? They call the whole continent, the whole country, after a commodity, gold. The Gold Coast.
Gold Coast.
Yes,
Ivory Coast.
Yes, Ivory Coast. Cameroon means what? Shrimp. So
Shrimp.
yes.
The place we have is shrimps.
So, but who are the people that live there?
So then it was about commodities.
So when you remove the identity, you remove the humanity. By removing the identity of the African, you remove the humanity from the African, and therefore nobody treats the African like he's a human. Till this day. And so it may be said simply, but inside of there is the complexity of what we still suffer today, of the world not knowing us, but more importantly, we have forgotten who we are ourselves.
Before I leap into the journey from Americas into Africa, I would like to maybe pick a brain around the Marcus Garvey movement, the repatriation era, all. Let's return back home. The businesses that we established there, the theology and philosophy that was actually mobilizing people in that direction. Ultimately, how that beautiful thought pattern was polluted in politics and crumbled to the ground. I mean, I've been to the Marcus Garvey Institution in Jamaica. I've stood in that ground. I've went to his house and etc. When you read how big and grand the dream was, and then the whole economic lawsuits and etc. blackmail the men until you crush that. I would love to see just three in one sentence. How politics played its way into religion and played its way into economics to actually become the default or the funeral parlor, which destroyed. Here we are, right at the beach here. New York and Brazil are just across those waters.
Yes.
What was the role of those three institutions? Not limited to that, but when you look back at a grand dream defaulted, how did religion, politics, and economics put their filthy heads into the organization?
Yes, we have to understand, the impact of religion with any people, in any culture, in any environment. The concept of God is supreme and at the center. And when the European nations replaced in the African the image of his own God, that destroyed the whole center and the foundation of our reality in our world. So the mere fact that we can worship God outside of our own image means that we're suffering from mental damage.
Mental damage.
Mental damage. We're mentally ill and don't know it. And we need
Christianity is mental damage.
Yes, absolutely. It was used and is still being used as a major tool against our people, because Christianity is not Christianity as it is written and as it came into being. It was formulated and politicized by promoting European culture, European values, Europeans as superior to everything on the face of this earth. And too many of our people bought into it and are still in it, and it was used as a tool to destroy our own spirituality, which encompasses our social systems, our economic systems, our own truth systems, and erodes our own self-esteem. That we began to believe that heaven is a place other than where we are, that hell is a place other than where we are, and that God is so far away from who our image is, that we seek to be outside of our own image, which takes us outside of our own mind, out of our own consciousness, and we don't realize that we actually have been invaded mentally, psychologically.
And painfully so, that actually the God that Christianity and Islam and Judaism would present to the African, he is a God, he is an Allah, he is a Yahweh, that cannot accept the African as an African. He must actually, first of all, go to a cleansing center where he must be scraped off of all elements of African, then only when he's looking partly European, partly Arab, can he now be accepted into the realm where God can say, now you look like my child.
Yes. So, the irony of that is, though, in all of those instances, they all come out of the African idea and truth of spirituality.
How painful. How painful.
Not one of these messengers or prophets thought outside of or came in the images that they have been presented today.
There's no Israel without Africa.
It is Africa. But because they have successfully taken the idea of Africa out of the Bible, you have Europeans who believe they are the people of that Bible with no evidence. The whole Old Testament, there's no mention of a European nation in there. I look at some of our black clergy who are actually doctors of theology, doctors of divinity, PhDs, and they write a book called The 10 Black People in the Bible. What? The whole book is on Africa.
You can't see Midian. You can't see Keturah. You can't see Joshkan. You can't see
First of all, the
Egypt. You can't see
the original
Abraham.
Hebrews that went into Egypt were only 70 people. How do you come out in
10?
millions?
But how do you write a book on 10? 10. When actually 70. On one passage, you got 70 coming in. But of course,
it's recorded that Joseph married an Egyptian wife. It's recorded that Abraham married an Egyptian wife. It's recorded. Not to say that they were white. I'm only saying that even if you want to be blind to the fact of who they were as melanated people, the Bible still confirms that those who were not in contest of being melanated people, they were also integrated into the people.
Nimrod built 11 cities. One of them being Ur of the Chaldees,
yes,
which is the root word for Babylon.
Absolutely.
And how does Abraham, who is coming from Ur, which is the same city where Job is coming from, come out as a white man, when in fact the city from which he is coming from is the city of Nimrod. Nimrod was a Cushite. Cushite is a black man.
Absolutely.
So even if we use this, what I want to call the Shemite theology, yes, of saying Shem is for the whites, Japheth is for the Indians, and then Cush is for the blacks. Even in that defaulted theology, you still cannot negate the fact.
You cannot negate that. You cannot negate that at all. It's there in plain evidence. But we've been learned how to ignore what is plainly set before us and to actually worship that which is an illusion.
Let's tip-trot a little bit and get into the history and the movement from the Black Panther movement, from the Marcus Garvey era, the Black consciousness, Pan-Africanist movements. How did that vision find its way into the heart and soul of Ben Amini? And how did you get caught up, convinced to join the movement? But give us the history of Ben Amini from the time immemorial, as much as you can remember, and I will not disturb you.
Yes.
Move with us until you get here, where we are today.
Well, as you laid out, this whole history of the original people of the book being people of color, people from what we know today as the continent of Africa. Of course, we know the more ancient name is Akibulan, but what we know as Africa, this has been a long tread since the first time any one of us were taken from these shores and brought to the other side. We've always fought to be able to maintain the knowledge and the identity of who it is that we are in truth, outside of who we were being suppressed and whom we were being told that we were. And I have to say that because there's been a long tread throughout the years that ultimately led to a number of what we consider our prophets and prophetesses who were sent to our people to wake up our mind to who we were. We were not Negroes. We were not niggers. We were not colored. We actually had an identity. And these prophets that were sent to us, each one of them played a part in bringing us ultimately into the question you're asking me. And so that movement also affected Ben Ami. Ben Ami belonged to the African Hebrew movement in Chicago. And Chicago and New York were basically the cradle ground for many of the early African brothers and sisters in the States who accepted and reclaimed their identity as the original African Hebrew Israelite people of the Bible. And that was something to refute that the people that we knew in the Bible as the patriarchs, the prophets, the holy people, the Israelites, were people of African descent, for lack of a better term, as we use the term African today. And so Ben Ami, during the turbulent time of the 60s, of which many of us experienced, there's a lot of upheavals during that time, a lot of rivals of that time, and that usually happens when a person wakes up from their sleep. And when they wake up from their sleep, many times when you realize what was done to you and that awakened consciousness, you wake up angry.
Yeah.
And in that anger, we realized that they began to slaughter some of our leaders and our teachers. I was conscious during the 60s. I call that the traumatized era of our time. We lost Medgar Evers in the 60s, murdered and assassinated in Mississippi. We lost Malcolm in the 60s, 1965, right after he left, not long after he left Ghana and met with Nkrumah. We lost Martin Luther King in the 60s. We came into the early 70s and lost Fred Hampton, Mark Clark of the Black Panthers. So this is a traumatized era of where we've seen our people being murdered in the streets. We had testimonies of people like Fannie Lou Hamer, you know, an activist of the Panther Party, a political party in Mississippi, where she gave her testimonies about her being beaten as a woman, and even being asked that a black man was used to beat her or he would lose his life. So we were traumatized in that era, and certainly we realized that something had to give. And what had to give was we realized it was time that we look back to the land of our origin, to escape from the land of our captivity. And, you know, this is also immortalized in the great psalmster, Jamaican psalmster, Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley, when he made the song Exodus, Movement of Jah People. And that also captured the time and the era that we were in. For those of us who knew it was time to get out of America. It was time to leave America. And the latter part of the 19th...
These are the 60s.
Yeah, this is the 60s. You know, Bob wrote this in the early 70s, but it captured the spirit of the 60s. You know, it was inspired out of the 60s. So in that respect, we had riots all over America, burning down the businesses in major cities, proclaiming that we wanted to control the economics of our own cities. This is what Malcolm characterized and defined as black nationalism. So even though you had Pan-Africanism, that was about unifying the whole African family for our spiritual, social, cultural, economic development. On the more geographical, local levels, it was about black nationalism, where we took control of the areas where we live. That we control the politics of that area, we control the economics of that area. And part of that was going through the rebirth of trying to correct our spiritual mental damage that I talked of earlier. So you'll see that was an advent also, that the Africans in America, commonly known as Negroes at that time, who later call ourselves African Americans, that's when we began to change the images in our churches.
I remember actually the writing of the Black Bible, changing of the pictures in those
Absolutely.
books.
Part of my background is an artist, a painter. I was called into a number of churches myself to change the pictures of white Jesus and the disciples into black Jesus and the black disciples more to the original form and color. So I know that. I was a muralist. We used to paint murals on the walls in our communities so our children would not forget Malcolm X.
Graffiti.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This was before graffiti. This is the real portraits of Malcolm, real portraits of Martin Luther King, real portraits of Frederick Douglass with their slogans and their statements, so the young generation will know who these figures are. You know, the Patrice Lumumbas. People in America thought it was a woman because of the name Patrice. We didn't let them know who is Patrice Lumumba. We lost him during the 60s when Malcolm made the famous statement, if you don't understand what's happening in the Congo, you can't understand what's happening in Mississippi. If you don't understand what's happening in Mississippi, you can't understand what's happening in the Congo. That was a direct relationship to the assassination of Medgar Evers.
Assassinations happening here.
Absolutely.
Happening
So we are being slaughtered all over the world, wherever it is that we are as a people. This is the same thing that Marcus Garvey brought years earlier, when he had traveled to places like Panama, traveled to places in South America, traveled to the United States of America, when he's seen the black man's condition was the same all over the world. So that we need not separate ourselves as if we're in an isolated struggle, but we need to join those struggles together. We need to see ourselves as one people, because part of our oppression is because they continue to keep us divided. And that division is what delays our total emancipation and liberation. This is what Assaji for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah knew by preaching Pan-Africanism and the unity of Africa by the United States of Africa, because he realized that no matter what our individual capacities are, no matter what our individual endowments are, it will be meaningless if we were not able to join that together to be able to consolidate that power as one people, that we can take our rightful place on the global stage as a people that we deserve to be, and in fulfilling the full potential that we have the potential to be. So,
ladies and gentlemen, we are sitting here with Rabbi Cohen. Rabbi Cohen is living here in Ghana. What's the name of this place?
This is Itri Almena Mabel's Table.
Yes, we're at Mabel's Table here in Ghana. I just hijacked him on the sidelines to take me through some of the dungeons to understand the slave passages and the mischief that the colonial system did. And behind me here, I would want to give him a few moments to take us through the Black Panther, the Pan-Africanism. He's an artist, so he actually curated this whole chart behind me here. Without being too detailed, we don't have much of the luxury of time.
Yes.
But I would step up a little bit, stand up from where I am, and I would allow him to. I don't know where we can start. I'm a student also myself, to just walk us through maybe one or two of these charts and just give you young people an appreciation. And next time you're in Ghana, if you are coming to Ghana, please, if you are coming to Ghana, right here where I am sitting, you will be shocked. There is the beach, right there. You can swim, you can walk into the waters there, accommodation is here, and your host will be
Rabbi Cohen.
The Wi-Fi. To be Rabbi Cohen right here in Ghana. So let's stand up a little bit, and I would love him to take us through some of the information that he has here. He runs quite a number of these exhibitions here and running lessons for those that are coming into the country. So over to you, Rabbi.
Yeah, I'll begin here with this brief narrative that the purpose of this is to let people know that before the whole idea and the advent of talking about the African being a Negro and Negroes having no history, that can only be perpetrated if you erase the actual facts of our history, and that we were the first to begin what is known as the arts and sciences of civilization. So these images are all depicting and documenting the highest form of African civilization way before any of the Europeans were practicing what you would call civil behavior today. This is ancient Egypt, from the actual pyramids. Texts that in ancient Egypt talked about the concept of life, death, judgment, and life after death and eternal life in this ancient form. We will see all these images are to portray what Africans were doing on the African continent before any light ever penetrated Europe. And this shows the actual fact of us dominating not only on the African continent as we know it today, but also in the Tigris and Euphrates basin. It was also developed because of the Kushite empires that come from ancient Africa and what we know as Ethiopia today. There's a reason why in the Bible, the original text written by Africans, that Kush is actually mentioned as one of the geographical locations in Genesis. The last reference is Egypt, and it is not by accident. We begin with Ethiopia, Kush, and we end up with Kemet and Egypt. And that shows the foundation of we as African people at our best at the height of African civilization. I also show images here where you see images of Europeans being sold by Africans on the African continent. So the whole idea of slave, the name itself does not associate itself with black people or Africa. Sylvanus, Slavia, all this shows that white people at this time, we had a trade that was going on that actually was trading in white people as slaves in the beginning. We see, I want to capture here our sense of worship. And it was not in edifices only, but the sense of worship, a holy procession of our priests, an early concept of the Ark of the Covenant coming from one of our holy mountains. We saw there were holy places in the earth that we realized had spiritual vibration and energy that we communicated with the deities in our own African way. Then we have this panel here depicts the beginning of the slave trade itself. When Africa went into obscurity, our history was erased. But I wanted to portray more than anything else, not only capturing how this slave trade began, but also the fact that in the West, there were characters who were operating in the fullest level of intellectual capacity to make a contribution to the early development of the Americas. Whether it's in the United States of America, whether it's in the Caribbean, South America, we had people who came at that time, especially the African Moors in the early history, that actually helped lay the foundation of what we know as the Americas today. These images that are captured here are personalities that mingle with African personalities on the continent, with African personalities in the diaspora, who also made significant contributions to what we know as our early civilization in what was known then as the New World. And then we see here these images that they continue to perpetuate of Africans. The contrast between Africans in their regalia, in their garments, in their palaces, and their most esteemed portrayal. The world got to know us as naked creatures coming out of jungles to support the idea that we were not a civilized people. So how do you get from an incident where I showed of us in our most elegant attire and most esteemed portrayal of that character down to being portrayed as brute beasts? It was intentional that these things are still being portrayed in school books today as the source of Africans, and that the contact with the Europeans was our first contact with civilization. So,
but with civilization prior to?
Prior to, we understand that the Africans set the standard and the marks for all the sciences, the arts and sciences of what became civilization. The basis for curriculum even today comes out of our African science. You cannot study what they call a liberal arts that has been dissected in Western civilization that was all collectively together presented in the African curriculum the way we did it. Curriculum also suggests that it is circular. And we had to be a complete being when you came to an African institution in Egypt. You couldn't go and just come out and be an architect or just come out and be a doctor.
Holistic.
You had to get a holistic education. You had to be made whole as a human being. It was raising you from a dead level to a living perpendicular. You were raised to the level of being made into a god or a goddess. That was the purpose of you being raised up. The reason why we walk upright is because we're supposed to be upright, and you can only be upright when you're upright in character. And so you had to be the embodiment of those principles of civilization. It wasn't something that was in a book, it was in you. So then, in this respect, we see some of our contemporary leaders and giants of the day. You see the Asajj Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, you see Elijah Muhammad, you see Marcus Garvey, you see here His Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie. You see Martin Luther King meeting Elijah Muhammad. You see Rabbi Josiah Ford, who took a whole community from Harlem, New York, to relocate in Ethiopia in 1930 for the coronation of His Majesty. Here you see His Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie and Queen Zizitu. You see the Queen of England bowing down with her husband.
Say that slowly. Say that slowly.
You see
that's a very interesting picture there.
Queen of England.
I mean, it's a rare picture.
Bowing down to the Queen of Ethiopia.
Take us through what that means.
It means she had, by the principles and protocols of royalty, you have to submit to antiquity. And because they were at a throne that was older than their throne, that preceded their throne, she had to give obeisance by bowing down. And this is an important principle because, you know, there's a story that's not told often, and that is the story of Mansa Musa's journey from West Africa to Egypt. And at the time when Mansa Musa journeyed from West Africa to Egypt, 702 years ago, and 1324, when he made that journey, there was an interesting recording of his history when he met the Khalifa of Egypt. And the protocol was that everybody had to bow down when you were in Egypt. But Mansa Musa refused to bow down. It wasn't out of arrogance. It was out of the protocol that my kingdom and Mali and is no less than yours. So I cannot bow down.
I mean, the Great Zimbabwe was great before Great Britain.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But history records that it must not be taught that Zimbabweans built it. Because by admitting to that, you are actually saying that their civilization is greater than ours.
Absolutely. And that's why they distorted these things in history, changed up names. That's why we got the term chiefs in Africa.
We don't have a chief in Africa.
Because we come from kings and queens. Yeah. And how do you get reduced to chiefs? because they didn't want to be competed with in Europe. They wanted the king and queen to be associated with just European
Only
presidents.
themselves.
Only themselves. So again, we see the walkthrough here with other various figures that I said that were part of Marcus Mosiah Garvey in his office, pictured here. This is Noble Drew Ali here, one of the first ones to propagate African Islam in the United States of America. You know, not Arabic Islam, but African Islam in America. Here you see again Stokely Carmichael. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Samora Michelle, Stokely Carmichael with the great Asajio Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and Shirley Du Bois, the wife of W.B. Du Bois. You have here Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was the inspiration of Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey came to America just to meet Booker T. Washington, only to find that he had died 3 months earlier before getting there.
Inspiration.
And so inspiration, because he saw the work that he was doing in Tuskegee Institute. And then we see here, again, coming down with some of our great leaders that are here.
There is our own.
Our own, very own.
This one is still alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was with him in London.
Professor James
in
Small.
October last year, Professor
One
James
of our
Small.
great historians, understanding of much of our African spiritual systems, and has actually enlightened so many, along with his colleague, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Here is Bishop Charles Mason. He is the founder of the Church of God in Christ and really the Pentecostal movement, which was an African movement. And you see these articles here, they removed this now, but he came as an African spiritualist. And nobody in America had ever seen that kind of spiritual possession that they call the Holy Ghost now out of this man. But he had rocks.
Let's go, go slowly. Go slowly.
He had
Go slowly on the father of Pentecostalism.
Yes.
What was his name?
His name was Bishop Charles C. Mason.
Take me through. Just redo it again.
Bishop Charles C. Mason.
Mason.
And he was a spiritualist, a man very heavily spiritually endowed. And it's not by accident that you see these articles here, because he used to keep stones, and he used to keep roots and wood and horns. These were mediums that he used to connect spiritually. And they used to...
He's the father of Pentecostalism.
Yes, absolutely. Now this is saying the Assemblies of God, all of them borrowed from these concepts that they saw black people who believed that God was alive and active. And so they believed in the spiritual possession. And for years, they would call it Africanisms, because they said this comes from West Africa, traditional religion.
Voodoo, almost like voodoo.
Yeah, so they wouldn't accept it as mainstream Christianity. It was after he died that they did compromises
and they removed
to bring it into mainstream so it looked more acceptable. But you can't ignore the foundation of it. This whole idea, it used to be in Catholicism, they ask you accept Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior, they sprinkle with you with water, and they say you have the Holy Ghost.
And then they change your name.
But then they said, no, they had to see the manifestation
of the Holy Ghost.
By spiritual possession.
And that is
that's an African concept.
And that's the fundamental
Absolutely.
of Pentecostalism.
And that's how we move.
I learned something today.
See? So
what's his name?
His name
Charles
C.
Mason. Okay.
And so you see here, this is Alonzo Pedro Nino. And this is a very important figure, because this is one of the people they describe as a Moor who was on Christopher Columbus' ship when they sailed to the Americas. But Christopher Columbus came to Elmina before they went to the Americas. He came to Elmina because they knew that West Africa had mariners who knew the route across the Atlantic, from the west coast of Africa across the Atlantic. Because Mansa Musa's uncle, Abubakar II, took 2,000 ships from West Africa to the Americas in 1312. And we understand way before any European, when the Europeans still thought the world was flat or whatever they thought.
So we conquered America before Europe came.
So before you had the first ships of enslaved Africans arrive, the Africans were already in the Americas.
Wow.
And he was part of the proof of it. He was also the tutor of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella's oldest son in navigation and map making. Even though he went on the journey with Christopher Columbus when they came back, he was named the captain of the seas by Isabella and given a commission of 20% of all the spoil they brought from America, not Columbus. So you say, why? Because he was the one that owned the Nina, and his younger brother captained the
from West Africa.
Yes. His father was born in West Africa, taken from West Africa as a small boy to Spain, and then that's where the name Nino comes from, means small boy, and then sired these 4 sons over there. But their roots are from West Africa.
Oh. Nina, of course. Once you say Nina, that sounds so Ghanaian.
Yeah, so these are what we call the Nino brothers. You can Google them and look them up. And this is the real Sundance Kid. They made movies. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Look how black the real Sundance is. Because the sun has danced on him.
Oh, Sundance.
And treated him kind.
Sun?
So he was known as the Sundance Kid. Famous for outlaw, but in the same sense, in the old West of America that has been distorted by Hollywood.
Looks familiar. This looks familiar.
Yeah, a little familiar there. A little younger there of myself. To another portrait. I was invited back to one of our old African synagogues in Brooklyn, New York. So this picture was taken there.
That's you there?
Yeah, that's me there. Yes.
Delivering the word?
Yeah, delivering the word.
Come on, my brother.
Yes. These are some of our old patriarch scholars. Dr. Yosef Ben Yakanan, Dr. Ben. And then we have
I met her in South Africa.
Oh,
she's in South Africa now.
Yeah.
Luck.
Yes. Dr. Tony Luck.
Dr. Tony Luck.
Ambassador Bennett, Erica Bennett, and then we also have Madam Zuma.
I just conducted a wedding for the daughter.
Wow.
The other year in South Africa.
Oh yes.
She was getting married. I did the wedding ceremony for them.
Serious.
For them and Kofi Annan there.
Kofi Annan.
And then we also have Fidel
Castro.
And I think maybe the next project now is to extend this party.
Oh, without question. That's why the space is there. So it's coming.
There's enough space, young people. Those of you who want to become part of this illustrious history, as you can see the ending of one era here, there is still a lot of space. Going this way, right up into the sea. You must leave to get your name written on the archives of history also. Don't just live buying phones and buying shoes and forgetting to make a contribution.
Absolutely. That is the passion that many of us grew up in. We always wanted to make a contribution to our people. We always wanted to make a difference in the long journey of our people climbing back to the place that we deserve to be in and push down no more.
In conclusion, it used to be slavery by migration and chains. Slavery has changed. The system still remains.
Yes.
What would be your final message to the young people out there? Tomorrow morning, by the way, we are taking a ride into the dungeons where the slave market was taking place. But for today, I want us to end on a very nice note. Your message to the world and the young people out there. How do we deal with slavery? As she constantly changes her face, but does not change the system.
Well, it must begin with the age-old adage that is still relevant. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. You don't have to rely on any institution or outside source to search your own freedom. Study, read, and make it relevant to your reality where you are. And from where you are, make your contribution that you can to our people. It is not about individualism. That's a Western ideology. It's Ubuntu. I am because we are because I am. One man, one woman can make a difference. You be that difference. Start today. Don't wait till tomorrow. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but yourself can free your mind. Up, you mighty people. You can accomplish what you will.
Well, that is from Rabbi Cohen, and I hope in the next few years my beard will be as white as his. Learning from those that have walked ahead of us, part of growth.
But you'll be on this wall with your beard like it is now.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much all for watching, for spending these few moments with us, and send some love, send some stars. Please find the name of the place is
Mayville Stable.
Mayville Stable. They should be on the Elmina in Ghana. There should be Facebook pages and other things. Please follow them. When you're in Ghana, please come and check out this place up. These chats are always here day and night. Come and grab some history for yourself. And man, until our software changes, maybe our hardware will not transform at all. Until tomorrow morning, we will meet in the dungeons, walking through the slave markets and the gates of no return. Please stay away from trouble. Don't do what I wouldn't do, but if you do it,